why do you go there? Why do you want to put your life at risk? I mean, what do you have to basically to escape? Are you escaping something?
You have sort of field experience in some of the world's most challenging conflict environments. Somalia, Yemen, Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan.
How is possible, that you have civilians being violated and killed and displaced, and I haven't seen any really big reaction.
Going back to that thing of you can't learn from books and you need lived experience, but you have 2 master's degrees in different versions of international law and human rights.
She came back to Iraq 2 years after, and unfortunately she got killed in a roadside bomb.
Certainly with the ICRC, I imagine you faced a lot of sort of ethical dilemmas.
I was a long time ago visiting detainees that were belonging to Al-Qaeda, and of course some of them are actually war criminals. They basically have blood in their hands. Let's be honest with it. I mean, some of them make the news, killing scores of civilians.
What are the intricate dynamics of engaging with armed groups?
I tell them, you're not here to cry non-stop with the person that you're helping. Of course, feel empathy is very important and show compassion, but then you are here to help. Don't lose hope in people, and don't lose hope in people that don't look like you.
Hichem, thank you so much for coming and doing an episode of Causes. How are you coming into this conversation?
Thanks, Dave. It was a pleasure to be in this podcast. I'm very happy. Today, a lot of things came to my mind. We are following the news of the new Pope that came in with promises, for more peace in this world. At the same time, we have, the conflict erupting between Pakistan and India. We have Gaza, we have Sudan, we have Ukraine. So it's a lot of things happening at the same time. And it's every day you have to understand, where to go and what to prioritize.
The question I want to sort of kick off with is, you have sort of field experience in some of the world's most challenging conflict environments. Somalia, Yemen, Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan. What do we need to know about your upbringing to get a sense of how you've ended up with a draw to working in conflict zones?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And a lot of my friends are not in the sector. And I live in Geneva, Switzerland, which is not really known for violence and and conflict. And a lot of my friends working, in the industry, in bank and everything ask me, why do you go there? Why do you want to put your life at risk? I mean, what do you have to basically to escape? Are you escaping something? This notion of escaping something. And my upbringing is, so my origins, my father is Tunisian, mother is Algerian from North Africa, of course. And Algeria, for example, has been undergoing a civil war for 10 years in the 90s. I used to live in both of these countries, and that was pretty violent. A lot, of Islamist groups fighting against, the army, killing civilians. And I haven't seen, and I was maybe a teenager at that time, a bit less. And then I haven't seen any humanitarian support provided during these 10 years. I was like, how is possible, that you have civilians being violated and killed and displaced, and I haven't seen any really big reaction. And I was thinking that maybe there is something that I could do myself. And so when I studied international law, and I could specialize myself in international private law, business law, but I went to the humanitarian and refugee law because I believe that is something that is concrete and helps people. And I always had a kind of parallel between the story that took place in Algeria, even from the 60s, and the war against France, the decolonization war in Tunisia as well. You had a lot of situations happening. So it made me think about this and how I could relate to my personal history and how I can work in a field where I could feel myself being on the ground with the people that are suffering, actually. So yeah, for me, it was the right thing to do. Before joining the humanitarian sector, I worked at the International Criminal Court in The Hague, doing analysis of war crimes, creating the case for indictment. So it's made me feel the way as well, okay, I can, work on the desk, but let me see on the ground, how does it work, why people are suffering so much and how I can make sure to prevent the suffering, if any. So yeah, my upbringing was a lot of travels, a lot of different countries, and I ended up myself traveling as well. So I think you can't escape your past, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We'll get into a lot of that, and also you've got 2 degrees, not one, is that right? In
Yeah,
different law degrees, 2 masters in law. Yeah, yeah. We'll get into that. There's a question on it. Give us a 1 minute sort of whistle stop tour, I guess, of your career up to now.
yeah. No, I mean, my career is just, I studied international law, and then I went at the ICC, at the criminal court in The Hague as a very, very young, young junior professional. Then I went straight to the ICRC, the International Committee of the Red Cross. So the International Red Cross, where I worked for 12 years. This is where I spent 11 years in the field, concretely in countries of conflict, staying, 1 year, 1 year and a half there. And then I moved, I moved to Geneva as well. My wife as well works for the Red Cross. So she's as well in the same sector as me. And we moved to Geneva, and here I worked for 7 years for an NGO called Geneva Call, which is an NGO that, that talks to armed groups. So still in the field of negotiation, which was with my expertise as well. Then, yeah, since last year, I'm heading CIVIC, Center for Civilians and Conflict. It's an honor to lead this organization. And now I am here. And why I chose CIVIC to finish this 1 minute is because the world is going into flames. And I believe that if you are not into the fire yourself and trying, to salvage what you can, then you just become just a witness, a passive person. And I think at this time we need to really, really to act. So this is why I took this decision.
Yeah, yeah. So for people who've not heard of Civic before, can you and we'll come back to Geneva Call as well, but can you talk about um yeah, how what Civic is, what Civic's here to do, also sort of how you ended up getting this role, and also I wondered if you could touch on the sort of founding of it and Marla's story as well.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's an amazing story. And we just, commemorated the 20th anniversary of her tragic death. So just Civic has started 20 years ago with Marla Luziska, who is this amazing, energetic young woman from California that was an activist, someone that believes in peace. And when she saw that, when US came to Iraq in 2003 to launch its war, he saw the suffering of Iraqi civilians, of families, women becoming widows in a moment, children being killed, displaced, and she just couldn't sit. So she started, to advocate at the Congress in Washington, D.C., and she saw a little bit of the reluctance, and so she went to Iraq basically. She went directly to Iraq, and she started to create with Civic a kind of engagement to basically raise the voices of civilians that are hurt by actions of military, let's say, forces. And she started basically to look for them to get compensations. And she started basically to engage the US forces and the authorities and the politics back in DC, or give compensation to the victims of conflict. So this is how Civic started, really from this very unique angle. She came back to Iraq 2 years after the invasion with her driver, to come back again to families, to give them some news about that some compensation money was finally granted. And unfortunately, she got killed in a roadside bomb. But her legacy carried on. I think she believed that, that she would have been subject to some kind of, difficult moment in her life, and that we need to continue this work. This is how Civic was basically grew out of Marla Will. And now where we are today, we are an organization that is basically aiming at reducing civilian harm, keeping civilian and families safe in conflict zones. And how we do it? We do it by directly supporting communities on the ground. We have small grants that whatever they need to strengthen their protection, to strengthen their capacities, to talk to armed actors, to authorities about their own needs, we can facilitate it. I gave an example, in Ukraine, we are providing some support to women and children to renovate bunkers so they can use them. We provide breastfeeding equipment, toys, so to make them like child friendly. So it's used again. So it's really this practical aspect of the protection. It's not only dialogue. It's really about I help you concretely and I make you feel a bit safe, even if you have bombs, all over your head.
Mhm.
In the meantime, we talk and negotiate with the security and defense forces, with the armies, with the politics, and tell them that how they should work when they launch operations, when they launch military operations in protecting civilians concretely. So not use certain type of weapons. Don't use massive bombs when you do an airstrike because the effect on civilians which will be like, a disaster. So we have this frank and dialogue with these actors and we push them to change as well. So it's really about this concrete and realistic and pragmatic dialogue that we have with them. And then we are located in diplomatic settings. So I'm in Geneva. We are in New York, in Washington, D.C., in Brussels, in Nairobi, in Addis Ababa. And here we engage high level political decision makers to bring stories from the field and tell them this is what is happening. So your actions can make a change. At your highest level possible, we bring you what we see on the ground. Civilians being hurt, kids being recruited, women being, displaced and abused. So by bringing this field reality to the heart of power, we try to instigate change in the mentality and the decisions that they take that will have an influence on the ground. So I'm trying to create myself a feedback loop connecting the dots between the field, the and the global hall of powers and the various regional hubs as well, because everyone needs to know the stories of civilians.
I mean, obviously, ICRC, Geneva Call, like you've got this bunch of experience, but tell me about how you've ended up as the exec director of CIVIC. Like, were you looking for something? Did something come to you? How have you ended up in the role?
Yeah, it's I mean, the way this is now I speak about, professional growth and personal career, and if it can help listeners in their career at whatever stage they are. I mean, it's all good, of course. We all have, of course, a different path. For me, I really believe in that to take on executive roles in our field. My belief, of course, my analysis, you need to come with a strong expertise that cannot be just learned through books, conferences, workshops, but from the ground. Why? Because there is a plethora of organizations today. There's a plethora of actors, trying to do good, and I respect that. But I really believe that when it comes to concrete work, to credibility in our work, you need to come up with your own lived experience with civilians, with suffering, with trying to help and failing.
Hmm.
And so the way I built my career, I really wanted to get, this experience over a decade. Going to visit detainees in Guantanamo, going to help displaced people in Chad, reuniting families between their their children that are being, separated because of conflict. So I brought them myself, with my car. I was in Libya as well. I helped the ICRC to open the operations on the ground and negotiating with the Gaddafi loyalists and the rebels and US forces, bringing medicines to the hospital with my truck, trying to get out people in my 4x4 that are injured. So you need to live through these things. Then you understand. Then for me, how I came into this executive role is because I went through this path
Hmm.
that I learned what works, what doesn't work. It gives you as well perspectives, and as well, I believe, a sense of humility. So the whole path for me was really this field experience, this lived experience.
Going back to that thing of you can't learn from books and you need lived experience, but you have two master's degrees in different versions of international law and human rights. How much value do you put on them, like the degrees contributing to your career path? And how much value do you put on them in terms of adding value to your expertise?
No, this is a very good question. I mean, it's I love learning. I mean, to my team, when I came last year to the organization, I said two words: constant learning. I tell them, and I tell them on a daily basis, you need to constantly learn. So this is how my parents, you know, brought me and taught me. My mother, just to give you an anecdote, she's an Algerian. She grew up as well in the difficult times in Algeria. We don't come from very wealthy family. My grandfather was the guardian of the museum of the town in Algeria, so he was, a security guard outside. Not my grandmother does not know how to read, how to write. She was selling stuff in the markets. It was really basic, but he as well taught to my mother and her siblings, learn, 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 learn. My mother took a PhD in nuclear physics. And in Algeria, she was the second woman after the niece of the first Algerian president in the independence to get this degree. So this made me as well, let's say I didn't have a choice, I would say, to go into learning and to get degrees. So this just to tell you why, I'm like having all these degrees. I mean, I love learning and I like it. Why? So how it helped me, it gave me the mental framework, It's it gives me the kind of structured mind that allows you as well to fight disinformation today, to fight fake news, to come back to to facts. I really believe in facts, and you come back basically to something that you can explain without putting too much emotions. And you let the person in front of you dealing with the emotions, and it allows you to be better at your work. So when I was dealing, with families in Nepal, I was in Nepal in my first missions. I had to bring back the news to them that their kids were killed by the army or by the Maoist rebels. So I was traveling, walking 5 hours in the mountains. You reach this small village. They never see any foreigners in these mountains in eastern Nepal. You knock on this door, and you have to tell the news that their son got killed, and we have the confirmation, and this is a death certificate that will allow them to claim compensation. And so all my academic background, the science, the law, helps me dealing with the emotional outburst, the crying, the suffering, the pain that I saw, and the relief. And I really believe that studying, this masters of law, these very much, dry subjects allowed me to manage that and to be better. Because if I start myself being very much emotional, but I'm not helping. Not here to, and I say that a lot to my teams. Even when I was at the ICRC in the field, I tell them, you're not here to cry nonstop with the person that you're helping. Of course, feel empathy is very important and show compassion, but then you are here to help. They look at you as someone, as a professional. So this master's degrees really brought me this level of professionalism because I can always relate it to a principle of law, something concrete.
What are the intricate dynamics of engaging with armed groups? Like, presumably that takes a sort of very unique set of diplomatic skills. What are those dynamics when you're engaging with armed groups?
Yeah, no, thanks. I mean, it's negotiating, engaging with this type of actors. It's extremely sensitive. I mean, you just cannot go there without preparing yourself and without being sure about your strengths and weaknesses. Because usually you don't have many chances. If you fail, consequences can be really, really high, not only for you, but for the civilians that are under let's say, the control of these, armies, militias, armed groups, or whatever. Um, I would say that first and foremost, the way that I developed it over the years, you need to know the person you speak with. You need to know it's not just uh, a guy with a gun that is bad. If you go with this mindset, better not talk to the person. The person comes with his own story, and you need to understand what is his, because it's usually men. What is his story? And you have to go and you have to dig. You have to, before you even talk to him directly, talk to his circles. And I talk about like third circles, second circles, inner circles, businessmen, people that are having close links because of religious basis, like, an imam, for example, someone that knew him through the fact that he goes to the mosque a lot, if you talk about, groups in the Islamist way. And then you try to understand, to understand from where he comes from, his story is like a revenge. His family was his family hurt, kidnapped, killed by the army or the state, for example. And then you start to understand and to build a profile. Okay, I'm talking to this person, not someone only with a gun. And this really helps you already. Then I would say that the way you approach, don't come with your ready-made agenda. It won't work. I'll give you an example. I was in the DRC in the Kivos, and I wanted to meet the commander of a very big group, because his troops was basically occupying a field hospital that was managed by an NGO, and the NGO told us, please talk to the group and ask this group to vacate this hospital because the whole population cannot get any treatment.
Mm-hmm.
And you have like drunken soldiers in the hospital, harassing patients, drinking booze, so it's very bad situation. So we had to find, of course, this leader, and we went to this place, this kind of hut, and he told us, yeah, he's coming in 1 hour. Okay, we wait. 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours waiting, nothing. Okay, we ask around, is he coming? Yeah, is he coming? 1 more hour. Another session waiting. Then the night comes. Night is dangerous there in the keyboard. You don't want to hang out the night there. So we said, look, is he coming? Yeah, he's coming. Don't wait. Don't worry. No, I had to take a decision, of course, to step out and go back to a base and say, look, we will come back tomorrow. Are you sure? Come back tomorrow. The next day I came back and I waited the whole entire day, 48 hours. Then he came. And then we talked. And he looked at me and said, okay, you patient. You patient. I was busy. I say, it's okay. Everyone was busy. I understand you. So you see, it's a different mindset. Just don't come and I have 2 hours. Let's discuss and I
Mm-hmm.
leave.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is very important. And a third point that I would say, because I could speak like hours about negotiating and how to do, is about finding the right argument, the right incentive. Basically, why this leader, and it can be a chief of staff, an armed group, anyone, why is he going to please you? Why this guy is going to make something for you? What is it for him? It's not because the principles of law have to be respected. No, it's something else. Then you have to find the right incentive that sometimes is not even linked to human rights or international law. Sometimes it's linked to very concrete stuff, like if you want your soldiers to be safe, then leave the hospital, then they will be treated like anyone else and get the best care. But if you occupy this hospital, another armed group will occupy another hospital,
Mm-hmm.
and then there is no more health services for anyone in the whole region.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to use these concrete and pragmatic arguments that CIVIC we use all the time, basically, to try to make them changes and accept, let's say, behavior change.
You've talked before about the sort of importance of, like, we talk about international humanitarian law, and almost like, your expertise with international humanitarian law lets you know the niche, the nuance, the sort of all the terminology and things. You've talked about making those principles understandable for people, like taking it away from this sort of huge, cloudy, technical thing to like, this is digestible by armed groups and the communities that they're affecting. How do you take IHL and make it digestible? Like, how do you take that complexity and get people to understand it who have never even heard of it before?
Yeah. No, this is a very good point. And in Civic, this is basically our motto, is bringing back IHL and all these norms to where it belongs in the first place, which is civilians and people. Maybe a bit of history behind all these Geneva Conventions and frameworks. I mean, they were all created based on rules that are religious rules, for example, or traditional rules created by people on the ground. I mean, in the Bhagavad Gita, which is this Hindu religious book, is 4,000 years old. In Islam, you have, of course, a lot of scriptures around the protection of civilians. Traditional rules in Somalia, the Biri Magedo, for example, were used years before the codification of these laws were basically done by the West. So it's a very Western approach to think that the whole world needs to know about books that were, codified in Geneva in 1949 or in The Hague and so on. So knowing that, because I learned that through my master's, I realized on the ground that you need to deconstruct IHL. I know that a lot of lawyers will kill me hearing me that, but this is my belief. You deconstruct it, you go to the roots of it, and then you just bring the essence of it that is relatable to people. I always say that. I say, it's like how can you and we can communicate because of a common language. If I was speaking to you only in technical jargon, or it would be like difficult. We would hear each other, but that's it. The connection will not be made. So Civic, what we do really is really about, taking the essence and bringing to concrete actions. So I'll give you an example, in a part of our training. This is my teams in one. I cannot name the country for security reasons, but it's in the Western African context. We are training the army there that is not known for being really much open to IHL, and there are some violations. And basically, we tell them, look, you are using weapons when you do fighting, and okay, but what about using this type of weapons? Because if you use these big weapons, this is the cost of it. We use cost, the money. This is very expensive, and you don't have a lot of it. And the effectiveness of these weapons in the area is not really precise. So at the end of the day, your strategic objective will not even be reached using this type of weapons that are very costly. However, having a kind of analysis of maybe using different type of weapons and more precise, more focused, maybe will be like less costly for you, more precise in your targeting. And at the end of the day, you even have civilians being spared from the effects of the war. And they will be happy with you and they give you more access.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really about that. You see, I will not tell them Article 1, Article 3 will tell you to not. No, we use that.
Can you share a moment, like, is there a single moment of sort of human interaction in the field that has stood with you for any reason? What's the one that comes to mind?
Yeah, I have some in my career that really I'm someone that I don't show too much emotions, as I told you, try to really to be professional and so on. But there are two stories. That one story really touched me. It was in Chad in 2008. So I was at the border with Darfur. It was the Darfur crisis at that time already, the first one. And I was an ICRC delegate at that time, and my job was to bring back former child soldiers that were in the Darfuri armed groups, that we could succeed to make them release from these armed groups. And I had to bring them back to their families that were in refugee camps. So imagine that already, this suffering, moving out of your country, fleeing the war, and your son and your kids being, recruited forcibly by armed groups. It's terrible, and not knowing where this kid were. And I talk about families waiting for 4 to 5 years. These kids were abducted or forcibly recruited when they were like 12 years old, 10 years old, 8 years old. So I was going there, and I had like my small 4x4, and I had like three kids that were now like 15 to 16 years old, traumatized, and I had to bring them back to the refugee camp, to their families. So I was going in like 4x4 in the desert, and I was going there, and you had like the sunset coming there, the desert. Me and my small 4x4, not a Land Cruiser, because it was the Land Cruiser were basically taken by armed groups
Mm-hmm.
to make military pickups.
Mm-hmm.
ICRC was providing us with like this yogurt thing that is called, Jimny, Suzuki Jimny. It's a very
Mm.
tiny, very awful car that no one wants to take. So I was like, driving there with my big guys at the back that are much orders. And I arrived into this, refugee camp, and all the women came, full of colors and waiting. What's going on? What do you want? And out of the car, the first kid came, and you could see, I saw 20 women fainting, screaming, the men like shouting. It was the whole village was like bursting of emotions. They saw the kid of the whole community they haven't seen since 4 years. They thought he was dead, and he came, and they all surrounded me. They surrounded him, and it was just this burst of emotions, this collective human energy. And I really felt this connection. I did not feel here this professional, doing his job. I was part of them. And it was really, 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 really amazing, this feeling, because, and this ICRC really told me that, I mean, reestablishing family links, this is the best, let's say, feeling you can have as a humanitarian person. Because, I mean, for all of us, imagine if someone that you love, you don't have any news, you think he is dead or she is dead, and someone that you don't know, a foreigner coming from outer space, is bringing the news or himself or herself. This is crazy. This is really, really, really an amazing feeling. You go back and you feel relieved. At least there is this kid, he will sleep with his family this same night. And I think this is something which is an amazing moment. Yeah, yeah, I felt emotional here. I didn't cry, but I still felt emotional.
So on the way back, yeah, there was a feeling of relief, but also disappointment that you were back in the small sort of yogurt pot on wheels.
I really ask everyone to Google the Suzuki Jimny.
Certainly with the ICRC, I imagine you faced a lot of sort of ethical dilemmas that must have made you question, where you sit on certain positions and the sort of pragmatism versus your own ethics and things. What are those ethical dilemmas that you found yourself in, and how did you approach them?
No, this is a valid question. I mean, in our sector as a humanitarian, you are always, it is an internal battle, a battle with yourself about, to what are the limits. And, to give you a concrete example, I was a long time ago visiting detainees that were belonging to Al-Qaeda groups or very radical Islamist groups, and they were arrested and they were being detained. And I was visiting them, looking at, the way they are treated, the way, they are tortured, if their families, have contacts with them, trying to give them a care that any detainee, of course, needs it. And of course, some of them are actually war criminals, they basically have blood in their hands. Let's be honest with it. I mean, some of them make the news, killing scores of civilians, and making people exploiting themselves in the markets and so on. And you are here and trying to ask him, if he's okay, does he have access, to the doctor? And sometimes it's difficult, you like, at the same time, you go out of this jail and you see families of these same victims and like, what do you do? This guy is a monster. Why are you going to help?
Mm.
One day, there are these very top leaders in the Al-Qaeda movements, and I had analyzed that their judicial guarantees were not respected by this authority, So I had to take the case, and I went to the military prosecutor, and I made my case. I said, look, this is what the respect. And after I was successful. I was good there, and they were released. So these two commanders were released because of lack of respect of judicial guarantees, which is normal. I mean, but then so we had an internal discussion even within the office at the Red Cross. I remember at that time, it was in 0607. So for those who were old enough, it was the time of the very big fighting in Iraq, a lot of, violence, and the Al-Qaeda era, Al-Qaeda booming. And yeah, they were like, okay, you did good, but what is the cost of this success? You want it at what cost? And this dilemma is always with us,
Mm.
and it's like, today and with Geneva Call and ICRC in all my life, I've been talking to difficult states, to states that are not democratic. They commit torture on their own civilians. But I have to smile. I have to say yes because my objective is to get access. My objective is to get access to these populations. So for some time, you put aside your moral, you know, let's say dilemmas or principles because you have your own objective. And this is where I look back to the studies and, this professionalism.
Hmm.
I think it's very important because it's too easy to say that you are wrong, you are a bad state, you are bad authorities, but okay, you will feel good, but you lost access. You
Yeah.
lost access to the civilians that are in need. So what did you gain at the end? You feel good for yourself, but are you here for yourself? I don't think so. You do things not for yourself, you do things for the people. But
Yeah.
it's hard. It's not easy.
You've spoken before about this sort of trend of weaponization of information, like disinformation being sort of deliberately used to endanger civilians. What examples of that do you have for people so they can just get their head around like how information is weaponized? And what is your thinking on like the harm that disinformation can have and also what we can do about it?
Yeah. No, this is a very, very big topic and it goes beyond the fake news that we see on Twitter and that that okay, we can be angry against that, but I mean, weaponizing words kill people on the ground. And I'll give
Hmm.
you a concrete example. I
Hmm.
mean, and we did a report actually in Ukraine. So we are working in Ukraine. We are supporting communities there, helping them, being safer around the front lines. And communities told us at some point to our teams on the ground that their Telegram loops were basically hacked. And those basically Telegram accounts were used to receive information from the local authorities about, alerts and evacuation roads that are safe enough for them, civilians, to go into safer places, to escape and leave places that will be under the shelling. And these accounts were hacked. And actually, the information that they're receiving were false information and false directions and itinerary to be basically heading into the enemy territories, areas that were not safe for them. And this basically, they went into areas they were, arrested, captured, injured. And this is extremely dangerous. This is really something that, you can't do that. So we help them, reviewing, the safety, how to make sure, that is, true information, cyber safety. But really this example, and we did a report on it. And really for me, this example shows how quickly you can, influence an entire community. They believe in a given information
Mm.
because they believe it's a legit one. And suddenly you have false information, but that have all the, let's say, characteristics of a true information, but
Yeah.
it's completely wrong. So the trust, there's a trust issue here. Then you don't trust anymore on authorities and it increases, risk and let's say potential, harm to civilians. Another example, I mean, is the use of social media and Facebook by parties to basically instigate hatred and fueling, uh, anger against specific communities. And this we saw it in, unfortunately, I cannot disclose the country where you had like this intentional fueling of fake news targeting specific communities just to create the environment and space to create violence. Then you give weapons to these communities and they are ready to fight. They are ready to kill. And this is extremely dangerous because it's an amplification.
Final question. You talked about um, everything sort of being on fire. Feels like bleak times in loads of respects. Give us something to be optimistic about and hopeful about.
Yeah, I mean, if I will not be in this sector, if I will not be optimistic and hopeful, I will do completely something else, like me and many in this sector. But yeah, I'm hopeful because we are witnessing, I believe, um a new rule-based order that was from the 1945, the West, has been being put in place, the order that they believe would, cater for their interest. Okay, fair enough. We are witnessing right now, maybe not chaos, but a shift, tectonic plates shift. And something that as well I say to my teams, I say a lot to myself in chaos arise opportunities. And I believe I'm paraphrasing Nietzsche in one of his books, not really fully, but more or less, if I remember that, I really believe in these times of fluctuating, situations. This is where you have opportunities. The best opportunities are in these situations. We just have to find them and pushes them. And I really believe as well, this is my first thing. I really believe as well that today, communities, people in, let's say, non-Western countries see that there is a role to play. Clearly, there is a movement that has been, undergoing a lot, of leaders, community members, social leaders, new politicians and new generations from the non-Western countries. That's okay. There is a space to take. And I think this is very interesting because, okay, there will be troubles, but something else will arise. Maybe less polarized, maybe less, you know, self-centered to a small group of countries or of people, maybe much more diluted, decentralized. So I believe that this is for me a very positive, optimistic trait. And the third one, and it's paradoxical to what we've been discussing just before, is the new technology, the rise, this capacity of reaching out to much more to people that were completely cut off,
Mm.
decision powers, ability to speak. I mean, in civic and organizations, we are able to have someone from a local community in Nigeria to speak to a group of high-level decision makers, people in
Mm-hmm.
DC. This is great. This is direct link. You see, the influence can be very, very strong. So here, I really believe that it's something that we can be hopeful for.
One of the sort of final things I want to do is just provide a space. If there's anything on your mind that you've sort of not spoken about that you want to talk about to this audience.
Maybe two things that I would like maybe to share for everyone who is listening is don't lose hope in people. Don't lose hope in people, and don't lose hope in people that don't look like you. Don't lose hope to them because they have the same hopes, they have the same expectations, they have the same feelings, and let's not politics and race, pull us apart. So yeah, connect, continue to connect more, engage. I think this human intelligence, this collective human connection intelligence, it's our biggest asset today in the world. So let's nurture it.
Hichem, thank you so much.
The pleasure.